What if I told you I could water the whole garden with one step? And now I'm watering the whole garden just like that. Simple. So right now the whole garden is being watered and you might not even notice. So for supplies, I've got the soaker hoses here. Used them previously, that's why they're a little dirty, but that's fine. I've got a regular hose to get from my water source to the garden. I've got a notepad with a rough layout of the garden where I want to lay the hoses. I've got pins to hold the hoses in place. And then I've got a trowel here to dig a trench for the hoses to go into, and then the rake at the end to cover up the hoses. Also, if you have a small hoe, that'll make digging the trenches even faster. And optional, but highly recommended, is getting a water timer. It makes watering the garden so convenient, but it is optional. So this is the garden plot here. It's kind of like a triangle-ish. And I drew it out, and I'm gonna have my hose starting here, and it'll be, you know, doing a bit of a zigzag back and forth. You want to account for a walkway. I planned for a walkway here. You don't want to have the hose in that walkway, because if people are stepping on the hose repeatedly, you can damage it over time. So I want to avoid stepping on it. So I'm starting to install the drip line here. I've got my hose that's attached to the spigot, and the drip line is starting here. And I'm just doing the border of the garden for now. That's what I've started on. And I dug a trench a few centimeters deep, just enough so that when I bury the hose, the hose will be just covered by maybe, you know, a centimeter of dirt. You don't want the hose exposed to the sun, because it will degrade the hose over time, and you want it buried so there's less water evaporation happening. Another thing though is when you're installing this, ideally do it when it's warm out and the hoses have been sitting in the sun, because then they're more malleable, easier to work with. So as I've gone along here, every few feet I take one of these pins and I just secure the hose in place. Really helps. You're gonna need to do that, especially around corners. I usually put an extra 1 or 2 in the corners, because when you're working with a hose, you know, it likes to flop all over the place sometimes. So I'm gonna carry on here and show you the next results. So I've got some more soaker hose installed, or, you know, partially installed here, and you're gonna do some adjusting as you go. When I was planning it out, I knew roughly where the walkway was gonna be here, and I originally had the hose cut off right here, like turn around, but then as I'm walking in the walkway, I realized, oh, this is enough space, I can move it over a little bit more. So you're gonna do some adjusting as you go, which is, you know, totally normal. I wanna maximize the amount of area that gets watered, and that's just the way it goes. So I've got some garlic growing here, which is not ideal. I knew when I planted it in the fall though that I would be installing these hoses in the spring. Ideally, yeah, there would be nothing growing here when I'm installing. I'm gonna have to pull up some of the garlic to install the hoses properly. That's fine. I knew that was gonna happen come springtime, so just the way it's gonna be. So I've laid all the hose here, and it's all set up in its trenches. I haven't buried it yet because I want to test it. I had some extra hose, which I ended up just rooting up over here, no problem. So now that I'm testing it, we can see that, you know, the hose is starting to drip. And I mentioned get a good quality one. It's got a fairly even drip the whole way from what I can see, which is good. So now I buried it, turned on the hose just to test it, and you can see, you know, there's some wet spots. There's water dripping from the drip lines all throughout the garden, exactly how I want it, and we're ready for planting. So I water the plants in the morning before the sun gets too hot, because I want to minimize any evaporation of the water. And I water for about 10 minutes or so. And then depending on the forecast, you know, if it's raining, of course I don't water, and if it's really dry, I might do an extra watering. Every once in a while I'll check the soil. I dig with a trowel about 6 inches down just to see that the soil is moist, so that I know the roots are getting enough water. So I really like using soaker hoses in the garden because I find it's a very efficient way of watering the garden. You get the water where you need it, when you need it, and you will use less water to get the overall result of watering your plants when compared to like a sprinkler system or even hand watering. And the water's already in the soil because your hoses are in the soil, and the water isn't being splashed around anywhere. Say if you're hand watering or you have a sprinkler, the water is going to go on the leaves of the plants, maybe other people. If you're working in the garden and the sprinkler comes on, you're going to get soaked. None of that happens with the soaker hoses, which is great. Your plant's leaves generally don't want to be wet anyway. That can make them more prone to disease and a whole other list of problems. So having the water directly going to the roots is awesome. So I really like using a soaker hose. So I want to make a note when installing soaker hoses, do not cheap out on the actual soaker hose itself. I've got 2 of them here. I bought these ones from Lee Valley. They're located in Coquitlam. Great quality. These are 50 foot each, so 100 foot total. Water makes it through all of them to the very end. Evenly spread water, which is great and what you want. Whereas these ones from Home Depot, when you link them up, water hardly even makes it to the end of the second hose, and the water's uneven. You get a lot of water at the start of the hose, and then at the end, like, you might not even get any. And when you look at the size difference between the two, like the Home Depot one is much skinnier, much thinner. The only reason I have these, honestly, is because they were at an end of season clearance sale, and I just wanted to try them. But yeah, do not cheap out on the soaker hoses. Make sure you get decent quality ones. So this is my water timer. I'm going to do a separate video about that because it is optional with a soaker hose setup, but I absolutely love mine because I set it up and it'll automatically turn on and turn off the water for me, so I don't even need to come outside to water the garden. I love it, but that'll be a separate video. So I'm watering the garden right now, and you can hardly even tell the soaker hoses are running. And I'm all done. So thank you for watching the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Really appreciate that, and we'll see you next time.